All right, welcome back, everyone. So we're going to bring our next presenters up very, very shortly. And I noticed I was told I was still live, so thankfully I didn't say anything incriminating or very, very silly. But yeah, I thought that was a really good presentation. So to introduce the next speakers that we have coming up, they're going to be talking around cybersecurity in education, which is also kind of close to my heart because I had my first professional experience in cybersecurity and sysadmin actually was working for Education Queensland. So I'd like to bring Billy and Goran up to the stage, and they're both from the University of Western Australia, and they're going to be talking about cybersecurity, threats, challenges, and definitely the opportunity that's around in the university sector. So without further ado, I'll jump out, and if you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat or in the Q&A. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Lucas, and welcome to, obviously, Cybersecurity in Education. Thank you for everyone attending today. We really appreciate it. So we'll kick off and we will go straight into who we are. So my name is Billy Hunter. I'm the Cyber Ops Manager at UWA. I've been here about 4 years. I've got approximately 13 years security experience in higher education and the health sectors, and unfortunately my AusCERT2020 shirt didn't fit me, so I'm thinking that's a slim fit. Goran Mitrovic, he's the Cybersecurity Operations Specialist, so he's a Cyber Transformation Product Owner, and he's been here 12 years at UWA. He's part of the furniture. And he's got 10 years cyber experience in obviously higher education and government as well. The interesting fact about Goran is that I'm going to get his larger shirt because mine doesn't fit. So we're going to cover the threat landscape today. So what is UWA seeing? Some of the challenges, so what it was like before and what it was like after. Some of the data ingestion challenges, some of the data analysis, and obviously the gaps that we identified. We're going to chat about, obviously, the reporting, the metrics, and the alerting as well. We're going to have a quick chat about threat intelligence and how UWA are utilising threat intelligence and how it's a benefit to proactive threat detection. And then at the end, we're going to chat about security awareness, how we take all of this data and it feeds our security awareness programme. And just a little bit at the end, obviously, to chat about the teamwork and the culture as well. Now, we do have a Q&A. You can pop something in the chat window. And if we have time, we'll take some questions. But if we don't have time, and we can obviously chat in the foyer or we'll meet in another room. Okay.
Really quickly. Sorry, Billy, do you mind sharing your screen with the presentation? Because we can only see your two lovely faces.
Yeah, that does help, doesn't it? Oh, it's you're on mute or share your screen. That's the common factor. How's that?
Thank you very much.
Is that much better? Thanks, Lucas. So we're going to talk about the threat landscape today and what it looks like at UWA. So in the past, many of our incidents were just script kiddies, our lone wolves just looking for opportunities. And that's just back in the day. Now we're seeing like complex targeted attacks from kind of well-oiled machines. And I like to say they wipe their feet in the way in and they leave the door open in their way out. They're there to stay. They're lurking in every corner and, the art of actually going unnoticed as well. So just quickly, 122 disclosed attacks relating to obviously the education and the research sector were reported to ACSC. So we are a target and we're being targeted, for things like, ransomware. So I'm going to mention Netwalker and Maze, primarily in the news recently with more and more headlines, appearing daily. And this is a concern, obviously. No one likes ransomware and the education centre is definitely a target for that. We're also seeing a rise in DDoS attacks. So we're seeing multiple people scanning our external assets and just trying to scrape stuff. So that's quite interesting. We're looking for those patterns. We're obviously doing a bit of investigation as well and trying to figure out, what's going on. We see an increase in phishing and spear phishing attacks as well. So against our, researchers and VIPs, we actually have seen a number of COVID-19 related emails coming in over the last, 6 months or so, and I'm sure everyone's seeing them as well. A significant increase in business email compromise. So over the last 12 months, there's been many attempts hitting kind of low target employees and then working their way up. So someone that has obviously a direct path to someone of importance, and these are becoming more common. The exploitation of vulnerabilities as well. We've obviously got Citrix and Pulse, Telerik as well. Some of the most sophisticated tradecraft observed. I'm sure everybody was rushing to patch their systems very quickly, and even in the news this morning, there's reports of still Citrix compromises and stuff as well. So, yeah, quite alarming. We're monitoring the dark web, obviously the paste bins and data dumps as well. Alerts are coming through on a consistent basis with obviously external websites and stuff compromised, and we are following up on that to keep our users safe. And we've got data of interest, so we're a research university. We're obviously in Perth, quite isolated as well, but we are doing some really good research. So we have data of interest, and that's what we're trying to protect. So we are a target. So what was it like before and what was it like after? Let's have a chat about this. So this is what it was like before. You can see 2017. So things were a little bit more calmer back then. I think everyone can agree. The problem with that was that the cyber team would spend hours and hours and hours with limited logs and no real source of truth. So we'd waste a lot of time. And I like to describe it as more like a jigsaw puzzle. Okay, so you've only got half of the pieces, and it's frustrating, So you take it out of the box, you try and build it, you realise half the pieces are there, and you're wasting your time. So we did a massive capability and maturity uplift, and we've really turned the corner. And as you can see, there's a lot more items there to give us that clearer picture. I mean, incidents would often be closed, without any knowledge, any understanding of, the patterns or attack surface or geolocation or anything. With multiple consoles, inefficient searching techniques, no baseline, and legacy technologies were really just embedded. So that really caused concern. And we even had missing logs. Most of the time, you would go searching for logs and there was none. And one of the benefits we had was to, map out an internal network. Finally, we understood what was out there. We understood our external footprint. We identified the gaps. We were able to do proactive detection of attacks and obviously their patterns as well. And we found out what end users were up to. It was the insider threat, and we were interested in that as well. So again, we had the bigger picture. So what were the challenges? Everyone loves logs. You start off with one log, and then suddenly it becomes multiple logs. And then before you know it, you've got too many logs. And that's the issue. You really need to have a plan. You need to define your requirements straight off the bat, and not just ingest everything. Start small, that's our tip. And you'll come across, as I say, varying log formats and obviously sources. They're in different formats and stuff. What's the logic of the logs? What format are they in? Do they even exist? That was just some of the challenges that UWA faced in the very beginning. And it's not a race. Everybody's keen to just jump ahead, show growth, show effort, build dashboards, combine, correlate data. Take your time. You need to plan. So start small, build some use cases. We suggest probably 5 to 10, and then obviously gather the feedback and then refine them. If you don't do that, you're going to get a lot of noise. And that noise is going to actually just get in the way. And that's what we found. We made mistakes in the beginning. And definitely develop a roadmap. That's definitely a tip that I would suggest. Have a plan. So in 3 months, you're going to have 5 to 10 use cases. In 6 to 12 months, you're going to have 20 to 30 use cases. And what are those use cases as well? And Goran, he'll chat through this later on in the presentation. And we suggest, obviously, starting with your crown jewels. What's important? What's the most critical systems in your network? What should you be monitoring? We also suggest, obviously, aligning with the MITRE ATT&CK framework, but don't try and cover all of these vectors. You're going to waste your time. You're never going to cover it. So try and align that with who's trying to attack you. And as I said earlier on, that's down to identifying the patterns. So the data allowed us to measure some metrics. So we applied a new control, or we tweaked something, we could show value back to the business. And that's what it was all about. It was about, we're going to turn A, B, and C on, and this is going to deliver E, F, and G. And that's very important. And again, use agile methodology. You're going to be constantly pausing, reevaluating, readjusting, figuring out what you're doing, because, this was a beast. It was a beast of a project. And what did the data tell us? Well, we had gaps. We had lots of gaps. It gave us an overview, as I said, of our network, and it gave us the good, the bad, and obviously the downright ugly. We had assets, obviously, we didn't realise that were exposed. We had coverage issues with some of our platforms as well, where we thought we had coverage, we didn't. And obviously the health of our estate was questionable. But that was good, because we had a start. We knew what we were up against, so we digested that data and had a really good understanding of our risk posture. And obviously what was required to uplift the capability as well. So the hard work started. So I'm going to pass you over to Goran just now. And he's going to go, a bit more in depth at, the reporting and metrics.
Thank you, Billy. Okay, yeah, well, as Billy has mentioned, we're on this journey of maturity uplift. So what we're going to discuss in the next few slides is just look at a little bit more detail in terms of the journey we took, some of the factors that we considered when we're planning and building out our roadmaps. We obviously can't cover a lot due to time constraints, so it might seem a little bit high level, but we're happy to share more information later on. Okay, so we'll kick off by looking at where we started basically. So I guess what we're about to look at here is the journey that UWA has taken over the last 12 to 18 months, and I hope that what we shared will help others. We're still on this journey. I don't think it ever ends for us, but we've definitely made a step in the right direction. We've learned a lot. I'm a firm believer that knowledge is power, and without knowledge and facts, improvement is often achieved by trial and error. In cyber, I think for many organisations, particularly for us, there's little time for experimenting and second guessing ourselves. Therefore, having facts will help us drive improvements in defences. That'll help us keep up with the ever-growing threat landscape that Billy just described in detail earlier on. So accurate data, logs, and intel are vital, and they will help generate metrics and alerts that will give factual information to help us move the needle in the right direction. In our case, we want to be more proactive rather than reactive, which I think we're on our path to getting there. So what we're about to share with you wasn't an easy feat. We're constantly learning and refining, and we're not afraid to make mistakes and learn from them. And I think that's probably one of the most important things. Have a plan, have a roadmap, be prepared to learn, go back, review, revise. That's one thing that we've learned, and working in an agile methodology definitely helps that. So what were our main drivers? As mentioned briefly before, I think our goals were to lift our cyber maturity in detect and protect domains. And to achieve this, we need to increase visibility. We wanted to turn the data and the logs and intel into meaningful metrics and alerts. We want to maximize our technology to help us identify and mitigate threats. we want to be in a position where we can investigate and understand the whats and the whys. So as Billy mentioned before, there was a lot of frustration in the past where we just didn't have those capabilities. Something happened, we found that after the fact, but we didn't really understand why it happened. And we wanted to use this data and knowledge to help us make informed decisions to mitigate these threats and risks into the future and to refine and improve our controls. So ultimately, how did we achieve that? We set out a simple plan, and that was to increase visibility, which would ultimately help us detect the known bad. We can then use that information to help us reduce our exposure, and it'll help us move towards threat hunting. So looking for the unknowns that are not so obvious. And we're certainly heading in that direction, and we're moving towards that head threat hunting space now. So some of the top tips, I think some have been mentioned before. I think it's important that when you start and look at any of this, don't try and boil the ocean. I think we discovered this pretty quickly. They're trying to do too much at once. You're setting yourself up for failure. Focus on really what's important and go for the quick and easy wins. So how do we go from, I guess, all the logs, all the data and all the threat intel to producing alerts and metrics that help us ultimately drive maturity uplift? We asked ourselves some simple questions to help us derive what was important to us. We also accepted the fact that we'll never be able to block all the bad stuff. We're in higher education after all. We're not a bank. We're made up of many types of, I guess, users. We have managed, unmanaged affiliates on a network, etc. It's a challenging environment. So we knew from the start that we'll not be able to stop and block everything. We can't enforce policies to stop everything that is not acceptable, that doesn't look right, looks bad. We developed a plan that was reflective of our capability and maturity at the time. So we were true and honest to ourselves. I think we have to start with small steps and build from there and constantly review that. What we did is we started with some use cases, and again, what you can see here are some high-level typical use cases. And for us, it was all around prioritizing use cases where logs and data was present and easy to obtain. And we had a couple of goes at this. And initially, we were pretty ambitious around what we wanted to get, and we quickly found that without the logs and the data to support those, we were not really getting anywhere. We're getting bogged down and trying to get information and logs that wasn't present rather than focusing on what was available to us and making the most of it. For the rest, we built steps into our plan to address where there was log and data gaps. We're focused on use cases and controls that will, help us answer the questions that kept us up at night. Some of the use cases that we implemented and are continued to tuning and optimizing around the malware, ransomware, phishing, privileged account activity, network activity monitoring, lateral movement. So those typical things that Billy spoke about that sort of keep us awake at night, where we had relative gaps around visibility. And we've driven a maturity uplift in this space, which also helped us quite extensively in being able to develop these use cases. And as Billy mentioned before, our use cases are all based on the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And our focus was to ensure that we had coverage across the entire cyber kill chain where possible. From a log and data sources point of view, we've been quite fortunate that along this journey of maturity, we invested quite a lot of effort into also uplifting capabilities on our technical controls. And this really enabled us to get some really rich log and data sources that helped us make those use cases a lot more valuable to us. Some of the things that we focused on, we want to have a really good understanding of coverage of our cybersecurity controls and how effective they were. So that the predominant focus was on those particular cyber controls that we had, and they're fairly typical for a SIEM implementation. We focused predominantly around network security controls, so firewall, IPS, application firewalls, email protection, web filtering, endpoint protection, and vulnerability management tools, and then we supported those by ingesting some application logs, authentication logs, and some asset information. But the most important thing that we learned along the way was that continual improvement was vital in all of this. So you couldn't just implement something, leave it, and not go back to it. So we constantly had to go back, refine our alerts to eliminate false positives, learn from our mistakes, and refine the data. And our use cases are constantly being revalidated and prioritized based on internal external factors such as threat intelligence or any current campaigns that are targeting us, for example. Top tip here is there's no perfect plan. As I mentioned before, be prepared to go back, review and improve. So after all of that, we've developed quite an extensive reporting and metrics capability. You know, we started from a fairly low base where we didn't really have anything, and over the last 12 months, we've developed reporting metrics that includes over 20 reports and dashboards. Our reports are fairly dynamic. They allow us to filter on particular parameters and allow for reporting over custom time periods. And we're now in a position where we can answer questions fairly quickly. The other important thing is that we distribute our reports amongst our stakeholders. So our reporting hierarchy structure looks, I'm going to share this with you right now, so it looks a little bit like this. So we start at the very bottom, we've got operational level dashboards and reports. The primary focus of those is for alerting and monitoring of cyber-related threat events. And these reports are predominantly used by cyber operation and infrastructure teams. On top of that, we've developed a number of second-level reports. These provide coverage and compliance metrics for a number of cybersecurity controls, in addition to provide threat and event metrics reports as well. These are used by a number of our teams across Uni IT. They provide key threat and event metrics and are used in alerting dashboards as well. And these compliance and threat metrics are summarized upwards to provide high-level reports. And these high-level reports provide a summary of the key coverage and compliance threat metrics across all of our controls. And these are also shared amongst our senior leadership team. So what we're going to cover in the next few slides is, as you can see, we've got quite an extensive number of reports here. We'll just deep dive into a couple of them. We'll specifically look at external exposure and asset encryption, just to demo some of the capability that we have. So here you can see an example of one of our reports, which is external exposure. And what we really wanted to understand is what our public footprint looked like. This report's been built predominantly on logs and data that's been ingested and generated by our vulnerability management solution, and it's been backed up by some network and asset information as well. Some of the key metrics you can see here. So predominantly we can see exactly how many assets we got exposed publicly, how many of those are vulnerable. We can also trend and see how those vulnerabilities have tracked over a period of time. In this particular case, we trended over 6 months. And at a glance, we can very quickly see what the breakdown of what those vulnerabilities are by severity. If we drill a bit further down into this report, we can actually also have a look specifically what those assets are that are exposed and vulnerable. And in our case, as I mentioned before, we're part of university, so the challenge is that not everything that is on our network is managed. So we were quite interested to understand what was the breakup between managed and unmanaged, and we quickly identify that. We can also quickly identify the ownership based on network zones or where those assets are located, etc. Further into this report, we can drill down a bit more and get specific information around based on severity, criticality, etc. We can identify assets that we want to focus on, which help us focus on remediation efforts. And lastly, as I mentioned before, we want to know that where we are and how we can remediate and prioritize remediation around some of this exposure. So what we also do, we fine-tune our use cases to generate alerts and trigger high severity alerts for targeted systems that we know are at risk or exposed based on the data that we gather from what we've just seen. So in this particular case, our use cases generate high-value alerts that basically tell us that if we know that a critical system is exposed, we can actually do something about it. The next example that we're going to have a look at here is around asset encryption. And this report is basically being used to make smart decisions around controls and risk remediation around some of our critical assets. I think not long ago, all of us experienced a shift in how we operate and how we work. We moved away from the office and we started working from home. So for many organizations, like this, including ours, this resulted in a number of challenges and exposed us to risks that we potentially weren't prepared for. Device encryption is something that we were particularly interested in, and the availability of logs and data meant that we could quickly and easily understand the risk exposure for certain assets and particular user types. And as you can see, this particular report here, we can quickly drill down by the business units, asset types, user types, etc., and quickly get metrics around how many assets we have that are in that particular domain and what their status is on encryption, etc. And we were able to use these reports to drive remediation efforts and quickly identify assets that were at risk. We can also look at things like the operating systems that we have across those domains, which again will help us remediate or drive remediation efforts. Furthermore, these reports provide a detailed breakdown of assets and users, and this information is shared with our teams that are responsible for remediation. As you can see through this report. Finally, what I want to talk about again is from a use case point of view. So we use this information to reach our use cases. And in this particular case, if we know that we have assets or users that are particularly vulnerable or exposed for whatever reason, so in this particular instance, if we know the end user devices aren't encrypted, we can prioritize our alerting for those user types or devices and generate high quality alerts to help our team to respond and remediate and be informed to make better decisions. And I think that brings me to the end of my presentation, so I'll hand over back to Billy.
Thanks, Goran. Yeah, we're just going to chat about threat intelligence just now. Okay. Obviously, how important threat intelligence is, and it's like having an extension to your team. So, what is threat intelligence? Everybody probably knows it's to act with purpose and context to proactively reduce threat and risk, and obviously to give us or kind of slant the balance in our favour. And this is kind of how we're using it. Okay, so we ingest all of the data and we overlay with the threat intel providers. We ingest that into a SIEM, and then we go through the process of automating, and then we take action on it as well. Now, I'll have to admit the automation part is something that we are looking into. It's not fully automated at the moment, and one thing I would probably have to say, in order to automate, you really need to have really good runbooks and playbooks and good processes and procedures behind the scenes. Never try and automate something unless these things are in place. So that's a kind of top tip from me. With regards to obviously strategic intelligence, we now have Recorded Future. They have been a big part into extending what used to be kind of operational intelligence, where we would just obviously have the SHAs, the IPs, the website blocking, the kind of normal stuff. We're now slanting towards that strategic intelligence, and we're now taking that on. Obviously, you've seen the nation state attack alerts. We're utilising that intelligence that Recorded Future is providing, and we're feeding that up to the board and obviously to our foreign interference board as well. So that's helping shape decisions out with cybersecurity at another level. So that just shows you how important threat intelligence is. And I'm going to chat about security awareness. I mentioned this at the beginning. This is all for a purpose. This is all for a reason. And obviously, we identified multiple opportunities to feed into our security awareness program. Some of the reports that we have, what's the top targeted department for email? Who's the top targeted individual? Again, who's the top targeted VIP? Who's researcher? What's the top trending malicious emails, subjects, and attachments? I.e., who's trying to attack us and what techniques are they trying to attack us with? Top 10 users of interest, so who's doing stuff on our network, whether it be, downloading of files, stuff on the internet sites, there's C2 command and control traffic from their machines, and what's the top 10 machines of interest? Is it within a student area? Is it a faculty? These kind of questions that we can answer. And what that does is it provides us with that overarching picture of, can we tailor security awareness programs to certain departments? So, for instance, we can then download emails, we can download attachments, we can then try and target our phishing campaigns with a similar type of attacks. And the results are astounding. We're reducing our click rate. We're getting more things reported to us. We've implemented a phish report button as well. We've introduced safe links. We've introduced a LastPass. There's a lot of things that we've helped improve our security awareness program, and we're learning all the time. And I think it's probably safe to say as well that we have instilled cyber with the help of all our stakeholders as well. It's on the tip of everybody's lips, and we've developed a cyber ambassador program as well. So making someone within different areas responsible for cyber in that area, and kind of promoting the cybersecurity team, and that's really important. And teamwork and culture, all of these words down the left-hand side here are pivotal to the success at UWA. We're a team. It's one of the best teams that I've ever worked with. We're really passionate about UWA, and obviously delivering the cyber journey. It's been a massive change from 2017 to 2020, and I'd just like to say thank you to every single one of the people that I've worked with as well. Without you guys, none of this would have been possible. So we'll go to the kind of Q&A if we have time. I'm not too sure. I'll be nudged, but Lucas, you can jump in. But if anybody has any questions, we can go to 410, jump in the foyer, or you can email us as well.
Yeah, fantastic. We do have 1 minute. I mean, the next presentation is pre-recorded and it's 38 minutes long, so we do have a bit of a buffer time. So there have been a lot of questions, which is good. So you guys are going to make a lot of new friends as a result, I think. And jump into the Q&A bit, and the main area was how much effort was this? Obviously, it's run over a few years, but ultimately, how much effort was there?
Yeah, I could probably answer that. We went from a very small team. So 2016, 2017, there was around about 2 to 3 people within the cyber team. We have increased our headcount to 7, and obviously we've brought in other resources as we went along the journey. There is a lot of effort to obviously uplifting your capability and maturity across the sector. And that's with infrastructure, it's processes, it's transformation, it's getting rid of the noise. So we did a lot of cyber work, which was non-beneficial to the team. We brought in a new associate director at the start of our journey, who's very focused and very driven as well. And he's came from a banking background as well. And really, he's been at the helm. He's, as I say, very, very passionate about cyber and wants to make a difference at UWA. So a lot of effort.
Yeah, I bet. So very, very well done, and that's the sentiment in the chat as well. So well done, guys. Looking at where you were and where you are now, it's absolutely fantastic. So moving on to the next question really quickly. Is the data captured and reported in any kind of tool? Do you use any tooling? And I know there's a few questions around the dashboard. So I think if you can kind of maybe answer both of those around tooling and dashboard and how it's created.
Yes, I can probably jump in and answer that one. So the tool that we're currently using, so all that we demoed in respect to the dashboards, so it's all created in Splunk. So it is a tool of choice at present. So we're ingesting a variety of logs as a covered, and Splunk is quite powerful and allows us to be quite flexible in terms of what we're doing. So we've been able to be pretty creative and create some of those reports and dashboards that have really helped us answer some of those questions. I guess just from an analysis and threat hunting point of view, and just understanding what's happening. So it's quite heavily utilized by the team at the moment.
Fantastic. Well, that's it for time in terms of questions, but there are plenty more. So you chaps will hopefully be around for the next few hours and maybe answer a lot of questions and make some new friends.
Yeah, not a problem.
Did you want to jump
to a particular room? And
yeah, I think we'll jump to 410 if that's okay. You'll see myself and Goran in one of the rooms. Feel free to jump in. Any questions? No problem.
Fantastic. Thanks, all right. Thanks again, guys, and all the best. Take care.
Cheers. Thank you. Thanks very much.